Cartel kingpin El Mencho is even more brutal than El Chapo and may never be captured as he hunkers down surrounded by a private army protecting his $1 billion empire. A legendary narco cop has Mike Vigil, a former drug enforcement agency chief, told The Sun Online that El Mencho's vicious Jalisco New Generation cartel, CJNG, now has an empire more powerful than the once feared El Vigil is one of the world's leading experts on Mexican cartels, being the former chief of international operations for the DEA and having gone undercover as an agent in the top cop told The Sun Online that El Mencho has brought a new level of violence that marks him out from other drugs kingpin. I would describe El Mencho as hyper-violent and extremely cunning but not ostentatious like most drug traffickers, Vigil told The Sun. His rise has been accompanied by a shocking savagery that has been compared to the brutal acts committed by terrorist group ICE. It has included ripping out victims' hearts, dissolving their bodies in barrels of acid, publicly hanging enemies, and even targeting pregnant women. Among its ranks are glamorous women killers such as La Katrina, who died in a shootout with. The ruthless warlord is also investing a huge amount of cash in building a state within a state which is armed to the teeth with armored vehicles, machine guns and rocket launch. His private criminal security force is seen as even a challenge to the Mexican army, with ministers having to deny they consider them a danger. El Mencho is the DEA's #1 most wanted criminal, and has an extraordinary bounty of $10 million on his head. Vigil has observed closely the rise of the drug lord, real name Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, and how CJNG has eclipsed the empire of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, once considered to be the most powerful drug trafficker in the world. Make no mistake about it, El Mencho is deadlier than a rattlesnake, and totally more deadly than El Chapo. So he contrasts paranoid and austere El Mencho with the bling El Chapo, whose fondness for women, love of the limelight and partying where CJNG's ascendancy has been helped by the capture of El Chapo, the former leader of the rival Sinaloa cartel, who is now languishing in a U.S. supermax jail. He went on, El Mencho is very different from the Sinaloa cartel in that he has invests a lot of money in creating a paramilitary forces which are very well armed and they operate in armored vehicles. Most of the drug traffickers, they invest in shopping malls, dairy farms, real estate, jewelry, but El Mencho is very astute and invests more equipment for his men and to get more men into the ranks of Jalisco New Generation. Vigil believes the incredibly paranoid drug lord is not going to be captured anytime soon as he hunkers down behind with his private army. He points to a 2015 attempt to capture El Mencho as a sign of just how vicious the kingpin cartel army. The Mexican Air Force brought in helicopters, flew them over a convoy carrying the cartel boss, but in a terrifying display of firepower, his bodyguard shot one of them down with a rock. CJNG went defensive by hijacking 39 buses, trucks, and cars, setting them on fire and using them as roadblocks to ensure El Mencho's getaway. The cartel regularly puts on shows of force that show heavily armed gunmen brandishing weapons, 50 caliber machine guns and sniper rifles. He is heavily protected by these individuals, so the chances of El Mencho being captured in the near future are very minimal. Who are the CJNG? The CJNG have marked themselves out as being extraordinarily violent even by the standards of Mexico's blood-soaked north. They have turned on their former masters, the Sinaloa cartel, seizing territory and buying off thousands of corrupt police. They are now thought to have interests from China to North Africa to Eastern Europe and now South America, where they have displaced Sinaloa. The speed of its ascent shows how quickly power can shift in Mexico's multi-billion-dollar drugs. They predominantly deal in amphetamines rather than shipping cocaine from South America. Not only are the profit margins higher, but according to one DEA analyst, has helped to shape their savage way of op. The problem with meth guys is that they're unhinged. They didn't have to wine and dine Bolivian suppliers, or fly to South America to do international negotiations. They're not sophisticated. They're very rough. Vigil explained that the cartel leader never stays in one place for very long. He normally stays one night in one location and maybe 2 nights. He's always on the move and has a good security. He moves from Jalisco to different states and he stays up in the mountains and is very well guarded by He's never cavalier with his security and always has an escape plan and has a large force that will engage with the Mexican security forces. His obsession with security is again in contrast the flamboyant El Chapo, who is married to Emma Coronel Ashporo, more than 30 years younger than. He also struck up a friendship with Kate Del Castillo, who introduced him to Hollywood star Sean Penn, with the three all pictured together. El Mencho, the narco ghost. El Mencho's personal fortune of around $1 billion marks him as being one of the narco world's brutally successful kingpin. But in stark contrast to the flamboyant Pablo Escobar and El Chapo, who carefully cultivated Robin Hood personas to offset their violent reputations, very little is known of El Mencho. What is definitely known is that he is 5 feet 8 of slim build and has brown eyes. He was born into extreme poverty and one of his early jobs was sicario or hitman for the Milenio cartel and married the sister of one of its leaders, with whom he had three. The cartel became aligned to the Sinaloa cartel but fragmented into two. El Mencho became the leader one faction called Los Torcidos, or the Twisted Ones, and he went on to rename it Jalisco. New songs have been sung celebrating rumored love of fast motorbikes and $100,000 cockfights. One of his nicknames is El Señor de los Gallos, or the Lord of the. He's been described as careful and paranoid, so elusive that has been as so paranoid about his own security is he that he reportedly built his own hospital to get treatment for a kidney problem. What doesn't lack, though, is confidence, and in 2016 he organized the kidnapping of El Chapo's sons who had dared to have a night out vigil. Told The Sun Online, El Chapo started to make mistakes, and as one of his main mistakes was his obsession with. He was hanging out in the mountains of Sinaloa and his wife wanted to go into the city, and he then starts communicating with Kate Castillo. All that leads to his eventual capture. El Mencho is not obsessed with women. He's very devoted to his wife. He's very austere, very cautious individual, doesn't appear in photographs, doesn't wear all the. El Mencho is much more intelligent and cunning than El Chapo. The authorities can now only hope he slips up, though they are unlikely to get any inside help. He's killed individuals that have crossed him. He does not forgive any treasonous behavior. It's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of luck, but he has not really made any mistakes so far, so we'll have to. But I can assure you he is not going to be captured anytime soon. The U.S. Justice Department describes CJNG as one of the 5 most dangerous transnational criminal organizations in the world, responsible for trafficking many tons of cocaine, methamphetamine and fentanyl-laced heroin into the United States, as well as for violence and significant loss of life. The brutal turf wars El Mencho has fought with rivals, in particular with the Sinaloa cartel, has seen beheaded corpses hanged at bridges as a war-chilling footage showed a rival gangster tied up in his underpants shortly before being slaughtered and his body then found. The cartel kingpin has been indicted in a U.S. court on charges of drug trafficking, corruption and murder, and is in hiding with a record $10 million bond. But the extradition of close associate Juan Padilla, El Cherry Vizcarra and El Mencho's own son Ruben Oseguera Gonzalez, known as Manchito, who'd been tipped to take over at the helm of CJNG, had led to speculation El Mencho could. Robert Bunker, Director of Research and Analysis of security consultancy Cara Futures and an expert on Mexico's cartels, believes El Mencho's associates are being targeted with the aim of ultimately capturing or killing. As part of the kingpin strategy being applied against El Mencho, those high-value CJNG individuals surrounding him are being targeted and arrested, Dr. Bunker told The Sun Online. Juan Padilla Vizcarra's El Cherry recent arrest and extradition represents a component of that ongoing Over time, the constant pressure on the CJNG will lead to either the arrest or death of its leader El Mencho.